While growing up in Brooklyn, Joseph Competiello was like most young Italian kids, who, in his own words, just wanted to fit in. Back in the 80s, the words fit in, relating to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, meant setting one's sights on becoming an associate and hopefully a wise guy. Bensonhurst was an area overflowing with social clubs and cafes, establishments that most younger guys yearned to be a part of. Not much different than the young John Gotti, who during the 1950s and 60s also wanted to be part of the social clubs in East New York, Brooklyn. If you think about it, this commonality among Italian American young men growing up in New York was a curse. Competiello, known to his friends as Joey Cavs, had some skirmishes with the law during his teens, which elevated to more serious crimes by his 20s, including arrest in 1995 and 1996, both for felony assaults, resulting in his pleading guilty in both those cases and being sentenced to 6 months on Rikers Island. He would eventually become part of a crew headed by Colombo member Tommy Shots Gioli, a crew that also included Dino Calabro, known as Big Dino, his cousin Little Dino Saraceno, and many others. In the early 90s, Gioli, who sided with the Persico faction against the Arena faction, had his crew drive him around during the war with strict orders to shoot on sight any member of the opposing faction. What most people don't realize is the majority of the guys running around in the street armed to the teeth during that war were young guys in their 20s. Competiello and the crew were committing a series of crimes such as burglaries, loan sharking, bank robberies, assaults, etc., as well as running chop shops for stolen cars. In fact, Competiello had such a shop on McDonald Avenue in Brooklyn. The only legitimate employment I was able to find for Competiello was a landscaping business he had with his father, where he was a silent partner. Around the time the Colombo War ended, 2 murders would take place, one involving a Colombo associate, Joseph Miccio, a car thief, who worked for Competiello at his chop shop. Miccio was accused of robbing a Mercedes from a customer at the restaurant Marco Polo in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. The restaurant's owner was Gambino member Joseph Chirico, and the Mercedes that was stolen belonged to a Gambino member as well. However, it's believed Miccio was killed because he was selling parts from the chopped cars and pocketing the money. One day, Miccio was picked up in a Jaguar by Competiello and another person, and at some point, Competiello shot Miccio in the head and then dumped him on Shore Parkway, but not before shooting him a few more times. In typical mob fashion, Gioli, very well knowing the reason Miccio was killed, told the Gambinos that he took care of the problem and that no more cars belonging to the restaurant's customers would be stolen again, thus scoring points with the Gambino family. On July 10, 1994, Carmine Gargano Jr. left his Bay Ridge house and told his mother that he would be right back and was never seen again. Initially, Colombo associate John Papa became the main suspect in Gargano's disappearance. But despite being convicted of 4 mob-related murders, Gargano's was not one of them. It was Calabro that ordered Gargano to be killed and told Competiello, "I don't care what you do with him, throw him out of a car, bury him where he sits." Competiello shot Gargano 2 times at the McDonald Avenue chop shop, but the 6'2", 230-pound Gargano didn't go down, so Competiello used a sledgehammer to finish the job. Gargano was buried in a lot near the chop shop, but Competiello and Calabro relocated his remains to a wooded burial spot in Farmingdale where the Gioli crew put their victims. According to Calabro, "We dug a pretty deep hole and threw Carmine in there. Then they used lime to neutralize the odor." Colombo associate Richard Greaves had supposedly made comments about no longer wanting to be associated to the mob. It's believed on August 3, 1995, Greaves drove his Jeep to a Brooklyn house belonging to Saraceno's family and was killed in the basement. Competiello, Calabro, and Gioli were also present, and they took Greaves's body to that Farmingdale location as well and left his Jeep near the Verrazano Bridge. In one of Saraceno's appeals, he stated that Greaves's murder actually took place in Competiello's house, but who knows? Following the death of Greaves, Calabro met up with Greaves's girlfriend and had sex with her. In 1997, the Colombo consigliere, Joe Waverly, gave Gioli an order to kill Ralph Doles, an NYPD police officer who married his ex-wife. Gioli passed the assignment to Calabro and told him that Doles was a Mexican who worked in a Queens club. On August 25, 1997, Doles was exiting his car when he was approached by Calabro and Saraceno, who fired 5 times from a .44 Magnum and a .45. Competiello was manning a crash car for the Doles hit. Allegedly, none of the hit team had any knowledge that Doles was a cop. The next murder was carried out on Bill Cotolo, who at the time was the Colombo family's acting underboss. During the Colombo War, Cotolo sided with the opposing Arena faction, something the Persicos never forgave. In and around 1998, Carmine Persico's son, Little Alley Boy, was freshly out of prison and placed in the acting boss position. The following year, he was arrested in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on weapons charges. The Persicos, coupled with the instigation of their captain Jackie DeRoss, began to view Cotolo as a threat and felt that he would make a move to take the family over if Alley Boy went back to prison. At the time, Alley Boy was released on bail, but it was assumed that he would have to do some time. So Alley Boy ordered Gioli to hit Cotolo. Subsequently, Gioli summoned Calabro for a meeting at Our Lady of Lourdes in Massapequa, a location, the church garden, that Gioli was known to discuss hits at. In code, he let Calabro know that they had to kill Cotolo by making the sign of a gun with his fingers and then tucking 2 fingers, which referred to Cotolo, who had fingers missing on one hand, letting Calabro know that it was Cotolo they were talking about. A meeting was set up under the false pretense on May 26, 1999. Alley Boy sent Cotolo word that he wanted to meet with him. Initially, the meeting place was one Cotolo was familiar with, 92nd Street and Shore Road in Brooklyn. However, when he arrived, Alley Boy wasn't there. Instead, Gioli was, who told him that the plans were changed. Gioli drove Cotolo to 1968 76th Street in Bensonhurst, Saraceno's family's house, the same house that the Gioli crew used to kill other people. When they pulled up, it was Calabro who met them, and according to Calabro, Cotolo questioned him. "Allie's here, right? Where are we going?" Cotolo's antenna was definitely up. The changing of plans, although not uncommon, had to be concerning. But now he's in a residential area, and Calabro appears. At the time, Calabro was still an associate. Nonetheless, they led Cotolo through a door, which was an entrance to the house's basement. Calabro, who was behind him, took out a gun and shot him in his head. The rest of Gioli's crew, including Competiello and Saraceno, wrapped Cotolo in a blue plastic tarp. Consequently, Cotolo would be considered missing for the next 9 years. Following that murder, Calabro was inducted in 2000 and put in a captain's position shortly after. His induction was followed by Saraceno and Competiello's. Saraceno was put in Calabro's crew, and Competiello remained with Gioli. What took place next was a wave of Colombo indictments. In May of 2008, the Eastern District of New York was able to secure a superseding indictment against Gioli, Saraceno, Calabro, Competiello, and other Colombos, charging them in a racketeering indictment, which also included murders, among other charges. The Gioli crew and 9 others were arrested regarding that indictment on June 4, 2008. At the time, Gioli was considered the Colombo family's street boss. In the ensuing months, Competiello began cooperating, a decision followed by Calabro. In October 2008, Competiello also told the FBI where to find the burial ground in Farmingdale. And on October 5, 2008, the remains of Bill Cotolo were discovered. In April 2012, Competiello and Calabro testified at the trial of Gioli and Saraceno. And at one point, the judge reprimanded Competiello for making hand gestures to Gioli from the witness stand. When the dust settled with all the Colombo trials, Joe Waverly, Gioli, and Saraceno, despite being convicted of other charges, were all acquitted of the Doles murder. Please remember to like this video if you haven't already, as it helps with the algorithm. And for anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or help me keep this podcast going, you can do so by the super thanks icon down below, or the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Ironically, the only ones to actually be sentenced for the Dole's murder was Competiello and Colombo. Prior to Competiello's providing information on the Dole's murder, it was considered a cold case. Competiello went for sentencing in December 2014. He'd previously pled guilty to his participating in 5 murders. Before the judge sentenced him, the prosecutor spoke on his behalf. Competiello's cooperation initiated a chain of events which resulted in the cooperation of other Colombo family members and associates, which led to the arrest and ultimately the convictions of nearly every inducted member of the crime family. The judge sentenced him to 12 years. While serving his time, Competiello wrote to the family of Bill Cotolo. As a young adult, my actions are inexcusable, and I'm ready to accept responsibility for them for causing you pain over the loss of your loved one. As a young man, I wanted to fit in, thinking it was the way to go, and I would be protected if I followed in this life. I am not that young boy I was then, but I am the man who knows right from wrong.